I'm very happy to announce author David Pfriem. Dave grew up in the Cleveland suburb of Euclid, Ohio, and he attended Euclid schools, and he explored his city until graduation from high school, St. Joseph's High School for boys, right on the Euclid-Cleveland border. He attended the University of Dayton, where he majored in English and graduated in 1966. Dave has written 2 books on developmental disabilities and numerous published articles on management and staff development. He has published a previous memoir, Uncommon Bonds, about his 6-year experience as a member of a Roman Catholic religious order. Having said that, please join me in welcoming David Pfriem to our program tonight. Thank you, David.
Well, there are many of you who are familiar with the story behind the book, so I'm going to kind of review how we got to this book, because it was a strange path. It was not something that came together immediately as I thought of it. When I published Uncommon Bonds, a lot of people thought that, well, there should be a prequel and then a sequel, and then you could tell your whole life. Well, so I started working on this prequel, and the original idea was not necessarily to be a published book. I was going to write something that was really for my children, a kind of a fill-in. I'm the youngest and last surviving member of my family. So my children and my nieces and nephews, I'm the only one who has any relationship to the past before they were born. So that's how I originally started the book, and that's what you'll see a lot. Hey, Russ, you'll see a lot of in the book in the first chapter. Actually, that first chapter is now 2 chapters. The second version did not get published with the book, but when family members acquire the book, I send them that other chapter, which has even more family information in it than I have in the book itself. So that's how it got started. It was the idea was to just write a chronology. Start, when I moved to Euclid, and as I grew up and experienced Euclid and so on. I experienced the birth of my cousin Russ, whom I see on the screen right now, and was even a couple of times was a not very good babysitter for him. And soon I realized that if I'm going to write this chronology, it wasn't as simple as I thought, and it couldn't be a chronology. As a matter of fact, there's a chapter in the book, and I think almost all of you who are present have read the book. There's a chapter in the book about a day camp, and my friend Paul and I attended day camp together, and it was, at least in my experience, a horrible week. And I had written that chapter as a separate story. I fictionalized it a little bit, and I wrote it as a separate story probably 20 years ago. But since my friend Paul played a major portion, a major role in the book, because we grew up together in Euclid, they decided to include that chapter, and I took it back and told the truth again, except it certainly is my memory. And of course, anytime you write a memoir, you can be a little loose with the facts, especially. You can be loose with the facts just because your memory is faulty. At least mine is not perfect. So I retold that story the way I saw it going to camp. So I had to add that chapter, but it couldn't be exactly chronological. And then I started realizing, well, if I'm going to write about Euclid, why don't I write it as a history? And then I found out that I really didn't know a whole lot about Euclid history. And that's when I got in touch with the folks from the Euclid Historical Society and Museum, particular John Williams. And I went over there you know, that museum was only open 1 day a week. I think it still is when it is open. It's only open 1 day a week. And I spent several Tuesdays with John finding out about Euclid history, reading his book, getting his advice on things that happened in Euclid, even in my neighborhood, things that I didn't realize. For example, when we moved on to Nicholas Avenue, there was a ravine there on the east end of that street, and it was part of the Euclid Creek. And then a few years later, it was gone. And I didn't know what happened to it until I started looking up the records and found out that the city had filled it in and put that branch of Euclid Creek into a culvert, and then built homes on top of it because Euclid was growing so fast. It was everybody was moving to Euclid in those late 40s and early 50s era, and it was a fast growing town and kind of exciting. So that's that background, and so I thought by 2011 that the book was ready for publication, and then I realized it wasn't even close. I didn't have a story. I didn't have anything that I could say, this represents both me and Euclid, and I struggled. Is it about my growing up? Is it about the city of Euclid? And how should I frame it? And that's when I met somebody that I give a lot of credit to, and somebody who wrote the foreword to the book, and that is Dan O'Shannon. And he offered to edit the book. And his advice at the time was, actually, you should have 2 books, one for your family and one for the public. And so I proceeded on that assumption that there would be 2 books. And I decided to write the one for the public first, and then I would go back and take the things that were necessary for the family and add all those details. Well, by the time it got to around 2019, and I'd been working on this and struggling with it and trying to figure out where things would go, I realized that I didn't need 2 books. I would just take the public version, and then if family members wanted to find out more information, I would send them the supplemental chapters, and that's what I've done. So those of you who are like Tim and Greta, you read one version of the book. My kids have another version of the book, plus a couple more chapters that I sent to them in a PDF form. And our designer, Rachel Gordon, she set those up to look exactly like the book. So if the family members wanted to print those out or print them out in the same format, they would come out looking like just the additional pages to the book. So that's kind of how we got to early 2019. And I thought, yeah, I'm done writing, but I'm not done with the book. And as some people have said, you never actually finish a book, you only stop. You just stop working on it. And, I knew it wasn't ready, and I was getting a lot of help from my neighbor. My nephew's wife, Patty, was a advanced placement English teacher during his career. And all 3 of those people read it, but Joseph read it 4 times and met with me innumerable times to make suggestions and to help me bring out the humor. Some of you may not think I have a sense of humor, but there's some actually funny things in that book. And Joseph was the one who would say, "That's really funny. You gotta emphasize that." Or he would say that so any of the good chapter titles were actually his. And so what I had was a memoir about me and about you. But I still hadn't discovered till the very last minute, and the man who I give credit for helping me find the real theme of this book is my next door neighbor, Matt, who is pictured as, that's him, who is pictured as Annette Kramer in the frame. But Matt was helping me with titles, and he came up with polkas, poodle skirts, and post-war promises, because Euclid is known for its polka Hall of Fame, and lots of ethnic folks who dance polkas lived in Euclid. And there, I talked a lot about polkas, or a little bit about polkas. I only made one brief mention of poodle skirts, but they were popular in the 50s. And then Matt came up with the genius suggestion of post-war promises. And it finally struck me, what was this book really about? It was about my parents who were poor, never had 2 cents to rub together. They were able to buy a house based on the GI Bill. And for $500 down, which they had to borrow, for $500 down, they could buy a house. And because they could buy a house, they could have a suburban life. They could send their kid to a good school. And eventually, I could get a college education, although I got it through the religious order, but I still would have been able to go to school one way or another, even if it would take me 8 or 10 years. I graduated in the half of the class that made the top half possible. So I know it could be done. So it was that post-war promise idea that helped me realize that this is kind of what this book is about. It's about the promise of being able to own your own home. It's the American dream. And that's how the thing developed and evolved. And with help from my readers, all of them, and especially from Joseph, we were able to craft a book that a lot of people tell me they like. So that's the story of the development of that book. So, any questions? Anything else you'd like to hear about, or anything you're curious about?
Well, or I could say, David, sure. It's interesting to hear you say that there were 2 books, because when I started to read your book last week, I was thinking, as you were giving the background on your family, that this is a book that I would like someone to write about my family, or I think every family should have the way that you gave the detail, the historical background of your family. And I think that, and I found that it was interesting that after I read the chapter of your school years at Holy Cross, and then I looked ahead and saw the next chapter was St. Joe's, and I thought, I was surprised that, after reading Holy Cross, I thought that St. Joseph's would maybe be like going in the same direction, and it wasn't at all. So that was interesting. And
no, it was, to put it mildly, a pleasant surprise when I entered St. Joseph High School. I went there because I had lost all my friends from Roosevelt days, friends from Holy Cross that were going to St. Joe's, and they just took it for granted that you go to a Catholic school.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I went home, and I think I wrote to St. Joe's, and of course she was delighted. And I thought she would pay a tuition, which I many times on a June day, I would walk to the school released, because that was the last payment on my tuition. So I went there gladly, or went there kind of reluctantly, because I didn't really have any other place to go anymore. And it turned out to be a wonderful experience.
Yeah, that was nice. I
Okay.
mean,
as little Tim Ryan can tell you.
I don't know, Tim, if you recognize Tim Ryan, but I remember going to your pub when I was a kid with my mom and dad
Oh, sure.
My internet connection is a little shaky right now. I apologize. I hope,
Yeah, Tim's Pub was actually world famous. A friend of ours visited Ireland and found a record album that was cut in Tim's Pub.
oh, no.
So
Wow.
it was known all over the world.
Glad to think that.
Dad, I have a question. Hi,
Hi.
Hi.
I have a
Yes,
question.
hi.
Do you have a favorite excerpt or something that just you loved to write or loved to reread that was in your book? Something that, I mean, I know that you have talked a lot about the toys section and how much that have made you happy, but then there's also a section about cars that have made you happy, and some of the things that made me most happy was learning about your very first flight on an airplane that you just did for fun in a day for like, what was it, $15? That's unheard of today. So,
Well,
you
that
have-
wasn't my first flight, but the first flight was when I was 12 years old, and we went to an Ohio State football game on that flight. And my cousin, who later became an airline pilot, wrote to me after he read the book, and he said, "You captured that moment. I relived every second of that flight from Cleveland to Columbus and from Columbus back to Cleveland on a Convair 240, a bumpy ride with old-fashioned piston engines." And that was our very first flight. That convinced my cousin to become a pilot. And he retired from Northwest Airlines as a 747 captain. I always teased him that he made so much money that they had to give him a pickup truck to carry his money home in. And he said, "No, that's not true, but they did give us a little golden wheelbarrow."
So
So yes, the flying stuff, that's the stuff that I enjoyed writing about. And some people thought, my wife, for example, thought that maybe didn't have a good place in the book. But I thought a lot of people told me they loved that part about flying.
Paul, I didn't want to interrupt you, but Dad, did you have something that was like your favorite?
Something that was my favorite? You mean like reading an excerpt?
Well, I mean, you don't have to read an excerpt, but what was the part of the book that made you go, you know what, I really loved this little section. It made me really happy.
I think surprisingly, the section about cars, even though I never owned a car, what happened was that description of America's love for the automobile came together for me. And I really loved writing that when I went back and I said, wow, I think I captured that. The desire for speed and acceleration that we boys had at that time in the 50s. Getting into a car and being able to drive it, so fast in a quarter mile. I attended drag races. I participated illegally in drag races and was once stopped for drag racing. And
Not my dad.
The policeman, I don't know why, he looked in the car, and I had my girlfriend sitting next to me on the seat, and she looked so demure and I don't know, innocent, that he said, "All right, go ahead, don't do that anymore." So I didn't get a ticket. I was drag racing on Lakeshore Boulevard.
I think Paul was next.
Yeah, this is Polly, chapter
Pauly.
3.
The famous Pauly.
My attorney is still reviewing the book, but I'm making sure. But I was with David on the second flight. We flew to Detroit,
Correct.
Michigan, out of Cleveland, on the first one of the Viscount planes when they first built those. And a group of us went. That was my very first flight. It was his second. But I also had some experiences throughout my life, similar to David's. But as I read the book, I really remembered so many good things that we had in our lives at that time. I also remember the first car that I ever drove was in David's driveway. It was his brother Hunnam's car, and he taught me how to drive up and down the driveway, taking turns, shifting the gears, and learning how to.
It was my sister Laverne's 47 Plymouth.
It was blue, wasn't it? I think it was blue or black. Blue.
It was
Okay.
blue. Yeah.
remember it.
Yeah, I described in the book how there was a guy that she was working with who was moving to California, and he wanted to marry her and have her move to California with him. And she told me, I didn't love him enough, so I bought his car.
There you go. Just like a guy.
That's good.
Dave, I have a cars or a comment about cars.
Yes, Bill, not Navani.
Yeah, so you talked about the speeding and the well, that's illegality of that. But to me, the thing about cars that I identified with so much was the slow part of the car driving, the slow cruising around of places where some of the cars might be filled with pretty young girls, you know, of the same age, and that was a whole area of enjoyment.
Well, you might have been more successful than we were. We drove around the parking lot of Manners, Manners Big Boy on Lakeshore Boulevard, and we never got anywhere. Sometimes the girls would wave at us and wiggle a finger. I'm not quite sure what that meant.
Speaking of cars, Dave, and Manners Big Boy, you remember all the guys from Joe's who used to go down there, and we would park in that back park called Racers Row, and then remember in the winter, they would put the tray inside your car. It'd open your door.
Right.
It would hook on the passenger side, and so you wouldn't have to keep the window down during the winter. And then, of course, you would pull away with the tray. And there used to be a contest at St. Joe's. They'd open the trunk of their car and show that they got 30 trays, and another guy might only have 20 trays.
No, I'm afraid we never. But I don't ever remember. We never had enough money to get a tray. We would pool our money and have enough to buy a Coke and a bag of fries, and we would split all that. It would be like 75 cents for everything. And then a quarter had to go for gas too, which could get you a whole gallon.
Oh, yeah.
There's 2 hands right there.
David, can I ask a question?
Sure, Pam.
Yeah, you know, this has been wonderful listening to these things because, you know, I lived in Euclid and grew up there kind of the same time. But my question is a little bit more serious, if I may. When you transferred and you went into St. Joe's, and that was a real time, I think, where you formed your goals in life and how you wanted to go about doing that. Was there anything in that experience that you find was really memorable, or something that was kind of shaped you or pushed you in one direction? Because you went to Holy Cross right after high school, right?
We went, well, Holy Cross was a school.
Yeah,
I entered the Marianist order right after high school.
right after high school.
Yes, early on, I think by my sophomore year, there were some of the teachers who were so inspiring and so professional that kind of just changed my view. And I thought maybe I could be a teacher, or maybe I could, you know, pursue a profession. I wouldn't have to sell gas, which is kind of what I thought I might have to do if I couldn't go to college. I'd be in a gas station. And of course, those of you who are young don't remember that people actually put the gas in your car for you and washed your windshield for you and checked your oil. They did all that, which has gone by the wayside. And I was worried that I might have to do that, and I realized by my sophomore year that there were some teachers who showed me that I could be like them. And when they would correct my papers, they would do so in such a professional way as to raise questions about how I was thinking and what I thought would be a good way to go about making my case for whatever I was writing about. So that I think, Pat, might have been the turning point. The first year was just so busy because we were in the so-called advanced class, which provided us with an hour of homework in every class every night. So I spent the whole freshman year in a little room at a little desk, doing homework.
Right. I think the Ursuline nuns were similar. The more homework they gave you, the better it was. And we had hours and hours. Now they get all upset if you have any.
Dave,
homework.
Dave, how do you think?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm just thinking. How do you think you developed your writing skills? You really developed wonderful writing skills. Where did that come from? How did you develop that?
Well, actually, I would credit my father because we were visiting an uncle who lived in Warren. Of course, he's passed. All my uncles are gone. And he had a little typewriter, and the family was talking about stuff that I didn't understand. I went down to the basement, and I got out his typewriter, and I started typing things. And I typed a paragraph that was some kind of story. And a year or so later, my father brought home a little portable typewriter. Not a real good one, but it was a portable typewriter. And I started writing on it, and I started practicing on it. And already by the time I was a freshman at St. Joe's, I was contributing to the high school newspaper. And so I've been practicing all that time. Now, not always very successfully, but I've probably been writing since I was 10 years old.
Hey, Dave, I have a question.
Manny.
The place I want to be in your book is your father's basement bar. There's no question. There's nowhere I'd rather be. I'd probably never leave. But my question is there any establishment or bar in Euclid that is still there that is a bit of a time machine that you go in the establishment, maybe it has a different name, but it has the same vibe, and you can sort of, it takes you back. Has anything survived on 185th that's still the same?
I'm sure there are on 200th Street. There are a ton of some on 185th, but on 200th Street, the problem is that once I got married, I never frequented it. I never frequented it.
Yeah,
At least not by myself.
Matt,
I don't believe that.
I was in
Well,
my
all right.
when I was a little girl, and it is a special place that holds a ton of memory for me. And both Grandpa and Grandma died when I was pretty young, and it's ingrained in my head. And I love the part in the book about Grandpa's bar because it brought me back to spending time with my nephews, Chris and David and Lucy, in Grandpa's and Dale and Sylvia in Grandpa's bar. So I'm gonna put myself back on mute, but it was unique, it was special, and not unlike Uncle Buddy's bar on the Slovenian side.
Oh yeah, over in near off of yes, your dad's place. That was also a fun place to go. And as a matter of fact, I just got an email today from someone who said, good luck tonight. He couldn't participate. He's living in California. And he said, good luck tonight. I'm sitting in your dad's bar.
That's cool.
Well, those times make great stories. I mean, my kids remember Grandpa's bar and he going around trying to get tips if they got refills for guys, you know.
Well, you know, it was your dad, Pat, who gave me the first Boilermaker I ever had. In fact, I had 2 in a row, and then I had to tell Donna that I can't drive home.
First one that got me drawn.
Notoriety I have.
Talk up.
Yeah.
You gotta speak.
Dave, pardon me, but I have a question for Bob Dooner.
Okay,
Bob, is your mom Vincetta?
that's my mom. Yeah.
I went to high school with her at Ursuline Academy of the
Oh.
Sacred Heart.
Oh, okay.
We would be a year younger than Dave, so a
Okay,
lot of
yeah.
those experiences were ours too.
That's when I hear the year 1943, that means that person is 1 year older than my mom. That's
That's
but,
right.
that's and my just reading your book, Dave, it made me think about my mom and dad, born in 1940, 1944. They both went to Catholic schools for part of their career in schools in Cleveland, and also to public. And I mean, I went to public school K through 12 in Cleveland Heights, but I did go to CCD for 8 years at St. Louis. And just your descriptions, I mean, I had enough experience with, just from that 1 hour a week, but I mean, just priests and nuns and, there were nice ones and some that you were afraid of. And I mean, as going to school, there were teachers who, you had your share of strict teachers you wouldn't, try and, mess around with or anything. But I just like when I would set foot into St. Louis for CCD, I mean, there was like a whole level of fear when it came to like a nun and a priest. I mean, I never even really did anything, but it was that deterrent was so strong to not even dare try anything. So
No, you didn't have to. I caught a yardstick across my back, and I wasn't even the one who was, who had done anything. It's just that she leaned over me to get somebody else and missed.
I do remember Greta, my mom would talking about a nun, Sister John Francis, and I could just remember.
Oh yes.
Hearing
JF.
like that was the nun that she was, I think, petrified of. So yeah, it was. And like I grew up in the 70s, and I didn't grow up in Euclid, but there were a lot of things, and
I'm sorry, go ahead.
My connection. I didn't grow up in the 50s, and I didn't grow up in Euclid, but as I read your book, there were so many things that I could relate to from my own personal experience. And one question I would have, I'm a pretty serious baseball card collector, and when you would go into describing your card collection, I could only hope that you have those cards in a nice album somewhere on a shelf, maybe right behind you with your Mickey Mantle.
I do not. My mother gave them all away when I went to the religious order.
Ah, okay.
I don't know, Paul, did you get them? I don't know where they went, but my son became a card collector, and he now has 100,000 baseball cards, maybe 120,000 baseball cards, and has finally acquired a home that allows him to store them all in a man cave. So
that's fantastic.
So he's got an appropriate room to keep them, along with other baseball memorabilia. But he happens to specialize in the 1953 Topps set.
Okay.
He just acquired the Mickey Mantle. He's got 6 cards left.
Wow, that's the Mickey Mantle cards are they're like in a whole class by themselves. I'm fortunate to have a few, but the 53 that's a really pretty set with the paint. They're like a painting of just like the portrait, but I don't know. I could go on for a long time.
Well, a lot of people could. Bill Fisher, you could too as well. Bill was
my experience,
major collector.
Yeah, I stopped collecting about 20 years ago, but Dave and I had quite the experience. And I'm from Pittsburgh, grew up there, live in New York now. But Dave and I was in the monastery or the religious order with David. That's where I first met him. But the experience in the book was paralleled mine almost to a T. The background in Catholicism, parents coming out of World War II, going to a Catholic school system and into high school too, taught by the same religious order. And then going into the monastery, 5 years we were together. But he loved baseball, still loves baseball, so do I. And that's where the card collecting came from. So our experiences are almost identical. The irony is that I spent 4 months in Euclid. The order sent me there to teach for 4 months. So I went and taught in his high school, which was kind of cool. So.
Yeah, and you still have some fun. When you visited, we went back to the school and walked through it, and you still have a lot of fondness for that school.
I do.
Experience there, and I still do as well, because they've done a marvelous job in maintaining that school. It's still beautiful, and they're still doing a great job with the kids. It's not as large as it once was. I think there's maybe 450, maybe close to 500 students, but they're doing a great job with the kids, and I'm really
proud.
I
noticed that those kids were really, they were polite to, I don't know, it was amazing to me, because all my background is in a public school system. Although that school today isn't run by the order anymore. It's run by, is it run by the diocese?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's nominally run by both the Ursulines and the Marianists. It's supposedly
a co-ed.
Ursuline and Marianist tradition. That's how they couch it.
Co-ed school now too, David.
Pardon me?
Co-ed school now too. Villa Angeles. It's got a different name too.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And it's the only school in Ohio that has won the state basketball tournament in all 4 divisions. Just so you know.
Really? I'm not.
Hey, Dave, can I ask you a question about your writing? I'd like to know, I've talked to a lot of other writers. I collect Cleveland writers and their books, and when I can get to ask them a question, I do. And did you actually, I know you worked on the book a long time, but at the end when you told me you're gonna finish this thing.
Yes.
And did you set yourself a schedule then, like get up at 8 o'clock and then stay working, and does that help to finish the book?
Actually, I wrote a good deal of that book over the last few years at my desk at my part-time job at the Winton place when there was nothing happening. I was working Monday nights from 4 to midnight, and from 7 o'clock till midnight, nothing happened. And I would get my computer out and connect to the internet and do whatever little research I did, which was minimal, and also, write and edit and write and edit. And so when I told the boss that, I showed him the book and I said, I wrote this book right here at this desk. He said, "Where's my cut?"
Well, that's good.
So I didn't set a deadline except for the last year or so. I said, it's time to just get this done. And then I had this marvelous help from Joseph, who actually lives at Winton Place. I don't think he's online tonight. I don't know that his computer is capable of doing that kind of thing, but he was the one who provided the impetus for me to finish.
Good.
And the talent, because he did a lot of editing and a lot of suggesting and a lot of laughing. And that was a question I want to ask you folks. What did you think in the chapter on my father? Because I thought my father was a unique individual. When I just listed all the jokes he told, did you find that funny?
Yes.
Yes. We all had dads who had like 8 jokes.
Yes. And they told them over and over. Yes.
Over and over. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, hi.
Hi, Dave. This is Tim.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, Tim is a historian, and now he's gonna point out some of my serious historical errors.
I have to say this. So, the section in the book when you were at Holy Cross, and you talked about Sister Rena.
Yeah.
And I remember because she was in charge of all the altar boys. I was one at Holy Cross, and your description of her really nailed it. She was just terrible person, frankly. I mean,
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine who also went there. He also went to St. Joe's, like me, Jim Kelly, and she was really mean to him. She was always ragging on him. And one day, his father caught up with her after Mass and he read her the Riot Act.
Ah.
And she never bothered him again. I mean,
Well, yeah, I think you needed something like that. She also went after my friend Tony Hunter for some reason. And I think it's just so ironic that Tony is now a millionaire.
Well, maybe it worked.
I heard that nun is still in purgatory. So you don't have to.
I think she went straight to hell, but that's.
I wouldn't doubt that. Yeah.
Can you describe how you got a publisher?
Actually, it's just Amazon is the publisher. So I didn't need to get a publisher. Now I did for my first book, which I'll plug right now. Mm-hmm. That was published by a friend of mine who owns a publishing company. It sounds like Together in Colombia, which cost me a fortune to re-import to the United States. I had to have an import consultant to get the copies of the book back because of ICE, which wasn't very happy about me getting packages in plastic bags from Colombia.
You can eat changes.
I was trying to make a point about it. Anyway, that was, you asked about publisher. And so I had a publisher for that. I didn't want to go back to him because we had some disagreements about style and grammar and stuff like that. And so I found out that you could publish on Amazon. All you needed was an acceptable format. And that's where I hired Rachel Gordon, who put both books in acceptable format and allowed them to be available on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback version. And it's print on demand. They don't print books and hold them in a warehouse. You order it, they print it, they send it. That's how it works. Print on demand. So they print them instantly almost. And so they don't have an inventory. And there's no cost. Now, what they do is they keep the majority of the money they sell the book for. And but that's okay with me. I just want people to read it. I want people to enjoy it. I mean, I'm not in this to make money. I'm just having a good time.
Has everybody in the group read the book?
Has everybody read the book? I believe just about everybody.
I've only read the parts that are available on Amazon. I have it ordered, and I wondered why it was taking a few extra days. But now I understand, and I'll read it when I get it.
Because
but that's how I found out about Sister Raymond, the Samolises who lived down the street from me.
Oh, sure.
And so on.
No, Bill is very ill right now.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Yeah. And I know
How's
he's got
John?
the book.
John was a good friend of my brother.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you in Lakewood?
I'm living in Lakewood now. Yes.
Oh, that's where I live.
Oh,
too.
Great.
Yeah, we crossed the big divide.
Yes, we did. When we left Texas to move back to Ohio, it was hard to find a place to live, and my sister was living in Lakewood, so we lived here, and it turned out really well. My sister was a beloved person in my life. She passed away in 2014, but she was terrific, and she helped raise me.
That's what happens in big families.
David?
So I'm looking forward to reading it.
Oh, that's great. Yes, I think you'll enjoy it. Bob?
Yeah, I enjoyed the book very much, and I took notes about my own memoir that I will keep to myself and to my family that will never be published. But you know, so I've used your book as a stereotype for me to use. But there is one little gripe that I have. You talked about baseball, and you talked about, you know, seeing all the great all-stars, you know, from all the different American League teams. And you covered all the American League teams except the Chicago White Sox, which I was raised in Northwest Indiana. And again, the reason why I'm interested in your book was because I grew up, my family grew up in Glen Park, Indiana, which is what you described as an industrial suburb. And so Glen Park
like Euclid was, yeah.
Yeah. And anyway, and I thought, wait a minute, you mean Minnie Minoso and Nellie Fox
and Luis Aparicio?
Yes.
I loved all of those guys too, and Nellie Fox especially. So I apologize. That was an omission. And if you ask each one of you who read this book, you've got a gripe about something I left out that I should have put in.
David, remember 1959, the White Sox beat the Cleveland Indians out for the pennant. That was the last year. I think you might have had that behind you, leaving the White Sox out of your book.
Well, yes, I was discussing this with my son, and I know the Indians finished second place every year from 51 through 59, except for 54. But I forgot that in 59 they lost to the White Sox. It seems that they were always losing to the Yankees.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. Yes. Well, the Go-Go White Sox of 1959 won the American League pennant, but they went and played the Dodgers and lost 4 in a row.
Yeah, just like the Indians did in 54.
Right.
Giants.
Well,
Remember when I was, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Bob Kennedy and the family lived right across the street from me on East 213, just north of the boulevard. And so I grew up with obviously all of his kids. And but a lot of times I would go down to the stadium, I'd go down to the office, and he'd open up the back door, and he'd say, "Just go sit anywhere you want." You know, it was just like sitting where you want in the stadium. And so that was my connection, obviously, with the Indians. And he was traded, I think, actually he retired in '56 from the Detroit Tigers. But he caught the last ball in the 1948 World Series for the Indians.
Wow. They remember behind my dad yelling at him, and how can you waste a ticket on a flight?
Oh, jeez.
Well, another not so happy baseball story. On my birthday is September 10th, and on September 10th, 2001, my son came to Cleveland, and we went to an Indians game, and I had an employee who was an usher, and she got her boss to give us seats behind home plate. And so it was a great game. It wasn't a great game. The Indians got drubbed, but we saw that game that night, and my son stayed overnight, and the next morning I put him on an airplane, September 11th.
Wow. Holy cow.
Yeah. So it was there was touch and go, and then we got a phone call several hours later in the morning, like near noon. And he said, "Dad, I'm somewhere in Michigan, and they made us walk off the plane and walk all the way across the runway. What the heck happened?" So he was safe, and he managed to get a ride back to Cleveland, and he had to stay with us for 2 weeks. Couldn't go anywhere. Couldn't get back to Colorado where he was living.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mike? Mike is on the call. Do you want to elaborate on that story?
Mike, oh, you're in on this? I didn't know Mike was in on it.
Yeah, we've been here the whole time.
Oh, you.
Mike and Eileen are both on the call.
And actually, I wanted to say that Kat stole Charlie's question.
Oh.
My son was going to ask what the favorite part of the book was. Kat asked it, and so they got upset and went to ride bicycles.
They
were. Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, well, if there's anything I'm going to do, I'm going to piss off my nephews. It's just like the very best toys.
They weren't mad.
And I make them mad.
We don't want to make this a call about the Pfriem kids, because this is about Papa Pfriem.
Well, it's about a book, and you all became part of it in one way or another. And I wrote it for you guys. I wrote it for the kids and for the grandkids originally. It's just that other people found they like it.
I think it is amazing. And what family, this should be so grateful to you for sharing those memories, because how many people have all those memories and they don't pass them on, and then they lose a big piece of it. I know my dad died on 9/11, if you remember.
That's right, I remember. Oh yeah, we were at the wake.
Yeah, and
at the funeral, actually.
Well, he died on 9/11, and then we had to wait because we couldn't get flowers, we couldn't get the casket, we couldn't get anything because there's no airplanes flying anywhere, and blah blah blah. Anyways, what I was going to say is that after he died, I remember with my mom going up into the attic and going through a cedar chest. Everybody had a cedar chest at that time, not so much now.
Right.
And finding his military stuff. He had medals and he had pictures, and I never heard the stories. I never heard what went beyond that. And one of the things, though, I did find out, I know he wasn't a big swimmer. He did not, in the pool, he would stay as long as it was only up to his waist. You know, he never liked in the swim. Only to find out that he was shot down in the Pacific because he was a bombardier. And his plane was shot down. And there's pictures of him at the base then afterwards, and he was in the hospital. And I go, why is this? Why is he in the hospital? Why is he in a medvac unit, you know? And the stories that came out, it was like, why didn't I know this? Why didn't he talk to me about this? I mean, it was.
Yeah, well, the people in the Greatest Generation didn't talk about it much. I never got, my brother was a World War II veteran also. He didn't see any action, and he wound up serving as an occupation, part of the occupation of Japan right after the war. But he didn't talk about it either. And then when he was older and in Sunrise, he told me he couldn't remember anything. So that's one of the reasons why I wrote. I wanted to write about memories when I can still remember them.
Yeah. Yep. My dad fought too. He was on one of the first aircraft carriers, converted one in the Pacific. Was torpedoed, spent a lot of time in San Francisco. But he never talked, when I was a kid, he never talked about the war, ever. But in the last 10 years of his life, he couldn't stop talking about it all the time. And his memories were sharper than sharp. He had all kinds of stories. So I don't know, something about right after the war, they just, they didn't mention much. They didn't say.
You know, there seems to be a common agreement among them that it was too horrible to share, and so just get on with your life and build a life, and that seems to be what a lot of them did.
But little did we know about some of this post-traumatic stress stuff that we talk about now, or
a lot of that,
all this other stuff, you know, and that's too bad. But one other thing I wanted to say is, I read both your books, and it's like the yin and yang of a person. And I could identify with it because, for obvious reason, Uncommon Bonds, I read that, and it had humor in it and everything, but it struck at my heart. And then the other book, I just laughed uproariously because that was my father's basement, that was my father's baseball, that was all this stuff. You know. It was just all of that. And I thought you captured that perfectly.
Well, thanks. And a lot of people have said things like that. My dad built a bar in the basement. I don't know how many people said, 4 or 5 people wrote to me and said, we had exactly the same setup that you had. And people would come over and enjoy it. And that was why Kat remembers it was such a great time, because the family was together. And the adults might be drinking a lot, but there was a lot of laughter and a lot of love.
Right, exactly. So
Hey, Dave. Hey, Dave, on when your son's family came on the screen here, I noticed a great photograph behind him, the black and white. Are those your 2 grandkids?
Yes, they are. Yeah. Can we get the Pfriems back so people can look at that again? It is a great photograph. I think Eileen took that. Mike? Eileen, are you there?
Yeah, I took it.
Wow.
So it's like they're here, even though they're out riding bikes.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a great shot.
Thank you.
You have a good eye. Boy.
It was.
Yeah, Tim is a professional photographer.
Shots.
Tim is a professional photographer, Eileen. You should know.
Oh, okay.
He's
Well,
been
thank
doing
you
this.
so much for the compliment. I really appreciate
I mean,
it.
it was a cell phone camera. It wasn't even a camera.
That's great. That's what put me out of business.
Well, that might have actually been a real camera. I don't remember.
Maybe.
I don't know.
That big picture reminds me of, I first met David when I was 3 years old and he was 4.
Right.
We've kept in touch all these years, over 70 some years now.
That's correct.
I still remember living on Nicholas Avenue, 2 houses down the street from him. The first friend I got when I moved on to Nicholas. And the book brought back many memories. I don't remember all of them because my memory's not as good as David's, but he took the time to write it, and I really enjoyed seeing and thinking about all those things and could relate to them very well. And I can't believe he's got a wonderful memory, and he really put it forth in a wonderful book.
Well, you're very kind. You know, of course, when I get to write it, then I get to shape the memory the way I remember it, even if it isn't. If I don't remember it, it's your problem.
A lot of agreement.
Well, you struck a chord with me talking about going to your friend's house and calling them to come out. And I remember you did the same
singing
thing.
them out.
I grew
Paul
up in
and I did
Cleveland.
that. In
And-
fact, a few years ago, we were leaving what's the name of the new baseball park?
Progressive Field.
Yes.
Progressive Field?
Yeah, Progressive Field. We were walking out, and Paul and Marilyn were walking out on a different level, and the stadium was almost empty. And I yelled out, "Oh, Paulie!" and it echoed to the park. We turned around.
I've never seen that in print. Friends of mine have talked about it, but I've never seen it written about.
Yeah, apparently it was pretty common, but I could not find anything on the internet about it, about calling out your friends.
No kidding.
I did
Only
that.
if you have a 1-syllable name.
Yeah.
No, Okani. That was my girlfriend.
Yeah. I lived on the west side in West Park, grew up there with lots of similar memories, but we did the same thing, my friends on the street.
They would call you out.
Yep.
Yep.
And I would go to their house and call them out.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the same thing your parents, when you left on a bicycle in the morning, said, "Hey, be back for dinner." And
That's right.
When the streetlights
The streetlights come on.
in the morning.
Lights come on.
That's right.
Streetlights come on.
It
Yep.
was like happy.
Yeah. And then, of course, there was always the scramble to try to see if we had enough money to get a 15-cent cone at Euclid Race Dairy. That was a big deal. Passed right by it.
That's right there.
Well, David, I'm going to have to sign off because I have a legitimate meeting I have to attend.
Oh, yeah, this is illegitimate.
This is illegitimate, isn't it?
This was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for the invitation. And it was nice seeing everybody here and hearing more of the discussion. So I thank you once again and all the best. All the best. You deserve it.
Dave, I'm going to have to sign off too. It was a lot of fun hearing everybody's stories and comments. And I remember us talking about the toys.
The toys, you know, and if you thought that chapter was long and boring, which Donna did, you should have seen it before I edited it. It's about 1/3 as long as it was originally. I was a spoiled kid.
Yeah.
That was fun, I thought.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Barbara. Thank you.
Well, I had a lot of fun just listening to everybody.
Linda, well, great.
Hey, and
You're,
it brought back,
you're a recent purchaser. I didn't even know if you had time to finish the book.
I haven't even started it yet, believe it or
dear.
not. But I'm looking forward to it. You know, I read that first one and it just kept me up at night laughing.
Well,
So I'm
great. I
really
think
looking forward to this one too. But
there's more to
you know,
laugh
just-
about. Yeah.
Yeah, and just sitting here, you know, listening to everybody, it brought back my memories from my childhood too. So I appreciate all that, and you know, you caused me to stop and think and remember things.
That's
So
great.
thank you so much. Thanks for
You're-
sharing and thanks for being there.
It was a pleasure from start to finish. No, it wasn't a pleasure from start to finish, but it's a pleasure sharing it.
Good night, all.
Good night. Good night. Hey, Bob, are you calling the show?
Oh, well, you know, I want to say to you how much I enjoyed this evening, and I hope that, you know, someday we get through this whole thing and you could come to the library and you could have a program, you know, in one of our bigger rooms, and just like another thing I like to just say is, like, your book also, I mean, you were very honest with, you know, some of the things about the good old days that weren't that great. And, you know, I think that was important to, you know, to put in. And I mean, we all know, you know, what those things were, but for you to mention it, I think it also balances, you know, everything.
Well, you know, I didn't know who all would be participating tonight, Bob, but, you know, I had to think seriously about the fact that the American dream was not for every American, as it turned out.
Right.
You know, people who served in the military who were people of color, they had the same rights to the GI Bill of Rights and could buy a house, but they were steered other places. They were not,
right,
almost not
right.
permitted. I guess that would be, they were just steered away from Euclid. And people, and I just didn't know about that at the time at all. And I was grateful that I could grow up with all these Slovenians and all this polkas and all this fun and all this kind of stuff. But there was something missing too. I mean, you know, in my mind, that was really unusual when a Lutheran family moved in across the street. They were all Catholics, everybody.
Right.
No, Dave.
Minnesotan of you, Dad. You know,
Dave?
the Lutherans, they're so Minnesotan.
Yes, it's kind of like being in Minnesota. Yeah.
Dave, I just got to mention, you know, when you talked about the Croatians that moved in down the street on Nicholas, I think that was my uncle and my
that's
aunt
right.
and the
We
family.
talked about that. Yeah.
The Herniaks. He was Croatian.
And
My
that's
mother
the thing.
were Slovenian.
The Slovenians and the Croatians were very similar, and they lived near each other, but they actually kind of went to different sides in World War II, and there was a lot of mistrust.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I can also with Serbians and, well, you know, remember the wars in the 90s, but I remember a man came into the library once and wanted like a English Serbian dictionary, and the closest book that we had in our collection at the time was a Serbo-Croatian dictionary, and when I showed him that book, he just said, "The hell with the Serbs." And
you know, my grandmother, both my parents were, and my grandparents came from Slovenia, both maternal and paternal. And my mother's mother she said she only two good Croatians she knew were her two sons-in-law. And she said she never liked the Serbs because all they wanted to do was fight.
Oh dear.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's,
Well, I
yeah,
don't know
it was-
how I got accepted into a Slovenian family. We were German and Polish. I mean,
it's close enough.
Well, thank God you did. All right, Dad, I love you. I have to go. Mike is grilling a pork chop for me.
Okay. Wonderful. I love
You
you.
don't want it to burn.
I'm a lucky, 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 lucky girl with my father and my husband. So I have to sign off. But those of you that I know, I love and miss you. And those of you I don't know, thank you so much for being here for my dad today. But I gotta go.
Love you, kid.
But
Thank
I want to ask Bob Dooner to say hi to his parents.
Oh, I will. Nice
And
to
ask
meet
your
you.
dad how many times I had to throw him out of the pub.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay, yeah, great. Yeah.
They must have been a lot of fun then.
You know, there was one, I'd like to end with, I'd like to bring a final, just a final comment that came from one of my classmates who read the book. And he is our class's best writer. He's not feeling well and he couldn't be on tonight. But when he summarized the book, he had actually read portions of it early on and given me advice about it. He wasn't real enthused. And then when he read the final book, he said a number of things. And he said, this is not the same book that I read. And what shines through is radiant love. And so
Nice.
if that's how what he got out of it, then I'm really pleased. Okay, so we're signing off. Good night, Russ.
Bye, guys.
Okay, good night.